Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Let's call the meeting to order. So Commissioner Tucker and Vice Chair Mount are online. I don't see them. Will I see them raise a hand or?
Yes, we have Vice Chair Motter online. Are you able to see her?
I am now, yes.
Okay, great. I don't see Commissioner Tucker at this moment.
Okay. So would you like to call the roll, please?
Okay. Vice Chair Motter,
Present.
Commissioner Metz,
Present.
Commissioner Croft,
Present.
Commissioner Phillips,
Present.
Commissioner Gupta.
Present.
For the record, there's 5 present.
Are there any updates or changes, additions or deletions to the agenda?
No changes to the agenda.
Hearing none, I'd like to ask if there are any members of the public who would like to make a comment on an item not on the agenda.
If there's any members of the public that would like to speak on an item not on the agenda, please raise your hand or press *9 now. No hands raised.
Thank you. So the first item is the approval of the minutes. Do we have any discussion or changes proposed to the minutes or a motion to approve? I have one question, but I'll wait. Commissioner Gupta?
I was just going to make a motion, but if you have a question, go ahead.
I noticed the pack. Go ahead.
I have one comment, which I just like to thank staff for appending my comments on item 5, the status on the studies related to reliability and resilience. Other than that, I agreed with the minutes.
So that was my question. Is that considered part of the minutes or is that an addition?
That is
Commissioner Metz's.
Commissioner Metz's comments are in addition to the minutes as a supporting document that to reflect the comments that are made in the minutes.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes.
A second?
Oh, second.
All in favor? I think we can do it by show of hands.
Motion carried 5-0.
Great. Next item is Director's Report, Director Curatori.
Thank you, Chair Phillips. So the City Council on August 11th approved the amended and restated water supply agreement with the City and County of San Francisco. So that it completes our amendment to that agreement. Also we had a rate change update that we had to bring back to council. There was a clerical error in a few of our rate schedules. It did not negatively impact our customers. So we did make that change. It did go to council effective September 1st, 2025. There was a small amount in terms of a impact to our revenues, about $25,800 was the estimate. That was something that we had to modify and it was on our rates associated with the net surplus energy compensation package related to solar. Early in August, we had the Northern California Power Agency. They do a legislative tour to multiple cities. They do a rotation through all the member agencies, 15 or 16 members. They went to Santa Clara and Palo Alto as part of that tour. So we were able to host about 30 federal and state legislative staff. They visited in Santa Clara, they visited the Intel Museum and also their data center. And when they stayed overnight in Palo Alto, because we have a wonderful downtown, we also visited Rivian's headquarters and we had a discussion on how we had a public-private partnership for our Hanover substation with Tesla in terms of how they paid for a share of those upgrades to ensure that they had the power necessary for their business. So it was a very good and engaging tour with those staff. So we really appreciate the mayor and Vice Mayor Venker speaking on behalf of Vice Mayor Venker as the NCPA commissioner and the mayor speaking to that delegation. So it was very well received. Want to also talk about our public safety shutoff outreach. So as we approach the hotter season and the windier season, the dry seasons, we are contacting the customers in those areas. So we're proactively talking to those customers in the foothill areas that are susceptible to where we could have public safety power shutoffs. But I do want to just highlight that we are undergrounding all of those lines serving in the foothills. So everything basically in the city limits, west of Highway 280. We will have those undergrounded and completed by the end of 2025. We have a couple items out there. We have a voltage regulator, which is pole mounted. We're going to be changing that out in early April, just because of some of the supply chain issues associated with that. But the rest of those lines will be de-energized. In fact, our crews are out there right now. So when folks are hiking out there, you'll see our crews working and removing those poles. Rest assured, our crews do look at the weather reports. So if there is an issue where we have dry grasses or another potential, we'll reschedule that work just to be utmost safety for the community and our workers. Wanted to give pass on some thanks from the Palo Alto Unified School District. So they've been updating 9 school campuses. So it's a really heavy lift to get that work done prior to the school year. So I wanted to kind of quote what they wrote, just because we really appreciate what they were saying to our staff. So they expressed their sincere appreciation for our team, exceptional contributions and dedicated service in the recent school power projects. Your team's commitment and hard work were crucial to ensuring the projects were completed on time. I particularly want to commend your electric utility team, including Amir Amin, Ludwig Simpao, Brian Ward, Pedro Rano, Jimmy Rosales, Dean Goar, Alfred Santana, Freddie Tobar, and Jesus Prado. Really appreciated our team stepping up. One of the intricacies of working on Palo Alto School District projects is they don't actually go through permits with the city. So they actually go to the state architect. So that's one of the idiosyncrasies in working with the school district. So really appreciate our team stepping up and working hand in hand to resolve some of those issues. Wanted to highlight some of our residential electrification rebates. As many of you know, a lot of these rebates on the federal side are ending at the end of this calendar year. We have highlighted that, sending social media outreach to our customers, letting them know that those tax incentives will be ending. So wanting them to, if they want to move forward with their projects, we're going to kind of redeploy some of our staff so that we can work with them hand in hand and their contractors to get their projects online. So I wanted to just restate some of the success we've recently had. We've, as of September 1st, the utility has approved 76 rebates and applications totaling $280,000 in reserves for hot water heat pumps. So again, if our customers go to our website, they can look at the depth of our rebates, and those are in between $3,500 to $7,000, depending on their income and if they upgrade their panel and new circuits. So we really want our customers to take a look at that. There's also tech clean incentives that are offered by the state, and those are stackable. So not only do they get the tax breaks, they get rebates from Palo Alto Utilities and those tech incentives if you use those contractors. So this is a great time to electrify your home. Want to give you a brief fiber to the premises update. We'll have a more full update on our October meeting, but wanted to let you know that our fiber hut, which is kind of the centralized location, permit has been approved. So we'll be working with the contractor on that and scheduling. It's going to be located at one of our substations. We're actually expanding the secured perimeter of that substation to include the fiber hut, so it'll be inside of that. So I just want to let you know some good news in that regard, and we'll have a greater update on the progress next month. One other item I wanted to mention, and it's our advanced metering infrastructure base station. So what is that? We put basically a new base station on the rooftop of City Hall. You know, one of the challenges we have with AMI is having a strong enough signal so that we can read them all remotely. So we're very pleased to have that. We're able to get to those hard to reach meters that may be in basements or just difficult signals. And the progress update is we're about 90% complete with that AMI conversion, with over 66,000 meters currently on AMI. With this new base station, we anticipate that conversion rate to increase to 95%, and we'll have an additional 4,000 meters by the end of 2025. There are some hard to reach meters, about 5% that we'll have to get through in 2026. And that's a combination of their age, the condition, location. There's just some difficult meters that we have to get to, and those are the ones that we'll have to coordinate with our customers on. And for anyone who likes to look at YouTube, our staff member on our CPAL utilities YouTube chat did a little short on YouTube short video on the new base station and how it was installed. So if you're so inclined, you can certainly take a look at that. That completes my report.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Curatori? I guess I have one question. Just on the AMI, I thought our goal was to be 100% complete by the end of last year. Now it sounds like it's going to stretch out another 2 years. Was that unanticipated, or were we overly optimistic, or am I mistaken about the original goal?
I can give you some of the. I'm going to see if Dave Wan is available.
Yes, I'm here
to answer that.
Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Yeah, this is Dave Young, Utility Strategic Business Manager. Yeah, there have been a little bit of delays with the AMI. One is due to inventory. So the electric meters, we were waiting for probably delayed a year longer than we anticipated because of the supply chain issues. And also some of the meters we wanted to do internally by staff because of the risk that some of the contractors are doing, or that some of the work they were doing were causing extra work for us. So it was better to bring those in-house than outsourcing it. So our third-party contractor, UPA, actually left in April. So the remaining meters will be done internally by staff. So yeah, it is taking a little longer, but the customer satisfaction level is definitely better than it would have been if we had contracted everything out. Does that answer your question?
I think so.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay, and let's move on to the next item, which is discussion of the gas utility transition study scoping. I think, is there a presentation?
Yes, we have a presentation. Introduced Jonathan Ebenstein. He's the Assistant Director of Public Works on climate action.
Great.
Good evening, commissioners. Nice to be back here with you. So tonight we're going to talk about the gas scoping for the gas transition study. This is an item that's both in our 2023 through 2025 SCAP climate action work plan and also as a council priority this year. So what we're going to and the idea behind the goal of this study overall is to understand the financial and operational issues that we need to pay attention to and develop mitigations for any issues that we identify under a scenario of high electrification. So tonight, what we're looking for is feedback on the scope. We actually are working on the project already, but we've designed the project to be able to be flexible and adaptable based on feedback from the commission. And so the feedback you hear tonight, we hear from you tonight can easily be incorporated. The study is very much within the water, gas, wastewater engineering and operations team for utilities. And we're working very closely with that team as we move the study forward. So next slide, please. All right, so this slide just summarizes why we have a need to study the gas transition. And I think folks up on this dais understand the need and have been asking a lot of questions about when we're going to, get a plan in place on all of this. And, but for those who are watching, we have city, state, and regional policies that are driving electrification, building electrification. And if successful, you're going to have significant decreases in gas use. And that'll have financial impacts in terms of recovering the cost of operating the utility. It'll have physical impacts in terms of how the flows operate, and safety impacts as well. You know, we need to make sure that the gas system can operate safely through its entire life cycle. And the goal is to make the transition safe, smooth, and equitable. Next slide, please. So the study aims to assess the physical impacts and the financial impacts of the transition, estimate the cost of abandoning different parts of the system, identify strategies to lower those abandonment costs and mitigate the impacts of declining gas sales. And then by doing all of that, keep the system safe during the transition. Next slide, please. All right, so this slide is an overview of the planned study outputs. Most of these we're talking about in subsequent slides here, but essentially the study is going to give us the data we need on how electrification will affect gas utility costs, cost impacts to other utilities and the general fund, and ways in which it might affect some customer groups differently than others, and then the costs of abandoning the gas system. And we're going to use this, all this information to develop the strategies for managing the transition safely and responsibly. Next slide, please. All right, so to understand these different potential futures, what the future might look like, we're going to model 4 different stages in the electrification transition, representing everything from a 20% up to an 80% drop in gas sales. And that's primarily through replacement of gas, space, and water heating with electric alternatives. Those pieces of equipment represent 80 to 90% of all gas use in the city. And in the scenarios we're going to model, we're going to exclude electrification in large medical and industrial buildings. And that hopefully answers the question about why we're looking at an 80% reduction in gas sales when we have 100% water and space heating electrification for residential and commercial. What's left out there is that large industrial and medical, which has very specific needs for very specific gas uses that are more complicated to electrify. And frankly, we don't have enough visibility to have a game plan on those large industrial uses. But we do expect there will be opportunities there. But in terms of to model the impacts to the gas system, we want to exclude those for now because they have less of an impact on which mains can be abandoned, which is more what we're focused on here. Next slide, please. All right, so as usage starts to drop, there are going to be parts of the system that will be no longer needed. And the idea behind this study is to analyze where we could safely retire entire blocks of infrastructure, and then also where gas lines have to be preserved for key customers like industrial users, or to preserve physical flows in different locations. We also are planning to review gas main materials to help determine which areas of the system would benefit most from retirement. In some cases, due to the way, due to flow patterns, some mains might be needed to need to be retained to keep gas flowing in certain areas. So even if they have no customers at that point. So you know, if you need, if you have a larger diameter main, for example, that's needed to supply gas pressure to a lot of different neighborhoods, even if you disconnect all of the homes on that segment of line, you might still need to keep it just for system integrity. So we want to understand where those lines are and what constraints they create on abandonment. And then we also want to look at all the ways that the gas flow under different scenarios and understand if there are specific small additions to the gas system that might make more mains eligible for retirement on a shorter time frame. Next slide, please. All right, so there's, when you get into this conversation, you also start to get into conversations about whether it's more efficient to abandon gas at the block level or to go service by service by service. And you have a little illustration there in the upper right that shows how many digs you have to do to abandon service by service by service, as opposed to abandoning an entire block level. Now, the standard practice is to dig and abandon unused lines for safety reasons. We get probably our most frequent dig-ins are contractors working within a property line. And so if you have lines with active gas, even if you have no gas service, but the gas is still sitting in there, you have the risk of those dig-ins and you don't get those operational savings. So, and it's just a safety issue at the bottom line. And so, so that's a standard practice. You don't want a line sitting out there, but, and it's certainly cheaper to abandon block by block, but to get that done, you have to get everybody on the block to electrify their home entirely within a reasonable period of time. Otherwise, for safety reasons, you really need to go down there and get those services. So and that's every single person. A single person, with a single appliance can hold up abandoning of the entire main. So there's a really good chance that we're going to have to do at least a pretty significant amount of service by service abandonment. And it may be something between the two examples that we have in the upper right. It might be that once you get half the homes on a block electrified, you've been doing them service by service, but maybe at that point, the rest of the folks have electrified maybe their space and water heating, and they're amenable to some kind of a program or coordinated effort to get all the rest of the folks disconnected in one way or another. So we're planning to analyze different approaches in this study to understand, where the cost savings are and contrast the service by service abandonment with the block level abandonment. Next slide, please. All right, this is an overview of some of the different utility costs that can change with electrification. So declining gas use obviously decreases sales. And there are a bunch of costs that decline along with that. Then there are some costs that are sticky that you need them no matter whether your gas flows are declining or not. In those cases, abandoning different gas mains could potentially reduce workload, but it's sort of a stepwise function. You may have your maintenance workload or your capital investment workload starting to go down because you're maintaining less and less of the system, but until you have a really significant decrease, it may be you can't let certain groups of positions like entire field crews or entire engineering teams or meter workers either attrit out or move to other positions within the organization. And so you could have these situations where workload's declining, but costs haven't declined that much yet. We do have some benefits as a combined water, gas, and sewer utility in that effort can be moved from one utility to another. And so as less effort's needed on the gas utility, there's more time for maintenance on the sewer or water utilities. But that also shifts costs over to other utilities. A good example is customer service costs. You have the same number of customers no matter whether they're using gas or not. It just means those customer service reps' time is spread across the 3 other utilities instead of 4 utilities. And so that potentially increases cost to other utilities. And then, of course, as sales decline, there are potential reductions in the general fund transfer, utilities users tax, potential increase for city gas utility bills, as well as other customer utility bills, and some impacts on the way our participation in the cap and trade program work that we're going to need to model out to understand the dynamics there. Next slide, please. All right, so I'd originally intended to give you this presentation earlier in the summer. So I have summer 2025. The plan was to move the study forward with the goal of having preliminary results by fall 2025. We actually are on track for that. But we're going to have to scramble to take feedback that we get from you folks tonight and incorporate it into some of the preliminary results that we're getting. We have a lot more work to do on the study as well. So we're hoping to bring you preliminary study results in the next couple of months. We want to use some of those preliminary results to inform our 2026 through 2027 SCAP work plan. And we want to get a report. I would say early 2026 is more realistic than late 2025 right now for presentation to policymakers. So that's all I have. And I'm really interested in any questions or feedback you folks have.
Thanks, Jonathan. Before that, we should ask if there's any public comments on this item.
If any member of the public would like to speak on item number 2, please raise your hand or press *9 now. No hands raised.
Great. Questions for Mr. Abendschein? Phil.
Hi.
Commissioner Metz.
Okay, first off, thank you for the presentation. I had, I guess, about 2.5 questions. First is, what do you see as the impacts, and is it incorporated in the study, the impacts of the Bay Area Air Quality Management District proposed NOx rules, which would essentially eliminate residential gas water heaters in 27 and furnaces in 29. I think there's some big issues. Will that go forward? And if it does go forward, it in a way could be beneficial that it provides kind of predictable attrition of gas-fired appliances. Since if you can't buy them, you know about how long they last. So I guess the first question is that being incorporated in the analysis?
So it's not. It's being incorporated in a lot of other climate work that we're doing, but it's not being incorporated in this analysis because we try to take timeline out of this assessment. Instead, what we're doing is saying, let's take these milestones in the electrification transition of 20%, 40%, 60%, 80% reductions in gas sales. And let's just see what the system looks like at those moments. And we're going to do it in a Monte Carlo simulation so that we get a lot of different examples when we simulate these levels of electrification. And hopefully that'll surface a lot of different potential issues because we don't know exactly what the pathway is going to be right now. So that is something that's one of many factors that will drive significant electrification, but it's not something that's needed to incorporate into this analysis because we don't have a time dimension to it. We're sort of indifferent to when we hit these milestones in the study.
Okay, I think I understand. It just seems though that, for example, if you do it that way, if you take out the time dimension, then we don't know when, say, 60% happens. So from a business planning standpoint, in terms of revenue, in terms of costs and so on, it doesn't really help that much. And we know that this is what would happen at 60%, but we have no idea when that would be, is what I understood.
So I think there's such huge uncertainty in this transition that if we were to lay out a plan and say, this is when this is going to happen, that we wouldn't be planning for the widest range of potential futures for the gas utility. And that would put us in a difficult position. I think the sort of key information that we need is just how much revenue loss are we anticipating compared to the amount of cost reduction that we're going to be able to achieve at these different stages. I do think that when you start getting to the very end stage, when you're getting to 70, 80% electrification, time becomes very important very quickly. But right now we're in the early stages. And so I think understanding just the amount of revenue and the potential rate impacts that it creates gives us what we need to start thinking about how we would mitigate a world where we had that much electrification, that much revenue loss, and these potential cost impacts, because we need to figure out the answers to how we deal with the gas utility in that situation now, long before we get to that scenario.
Yeah, it's a big.
So it may
catch.
be that's the time dimension is more of like a second stage of the analysis. Once we have an idea of what are the strategies to manage the financial impacts.
Right, the mitigation that you just raised was actually my second question,
Oh,
which
okay.
is, since blocking by one person looks to be the biggest hurdle to shutting down a block, or do we have specific options that we're thinking about for addressing that?
Not yet. That's part of what we're trying to do in the study. Right now, we want to understand what we want to understand what that scenario looks like and how much there is to gain from helping people become more open to facilitating the shutdown of an entire block. How much value are we able to recognize from that? And then I think we'll start brainstorming strategies. The kinds of things that might be on the plate would be things like, looking at what the actual cost of maintaining those mains are for that specific customer, for example, programs, incentives, mandates or regulatory timelines for when that, for how long that main can be in operation. But all of these things require a lot of, both brainstorming, both practical and then legal and then just the financial modeling as well. So we're not there yet to have those solutions ready.
If I can also
talk to you.
just piggyback and add to Mr. Evanstein's comment is, we do have mains that we need to replace because they're due for replacement, whether they're PVC or steel. So really there's a ripe opportunity and a cost avoidance to replace those mains in those residential areas. So then it's a saving not only to the bulk of the customers, but if we can somehow look at some of those economics where it makes sense to look at those blocks as opportunistic kind of electrification, to let those folks know that there are new rules coming down the pike. And by electrifying earlier and electrifying now, there's a cost saving to them and there's a cost saving to the rest of the ratepayers. So looking at that balance and how we can maybe incentivize that such that it's a benefit to all the existing ratepayers and to that, maybe that block or that area where we don't have to do that replacement line is something that we're very interested in pursuing. So those are some of the ideas that, Jonathan, his team, the engineering team is looking at, understanding what those costs are and then what those opportunities are with that individual block. So, you can avoid that replacement. That's a big capital cost.
Would we be looking at the logical extension of what you just described, namely for CPAU to define its ideal roadmap? Here's what we would like to have happen for transitioning the gas utility, what we think would be the best way to accomplish all the objectives you just said in terms of, not having to replace, aging mains and stuff like that. Might we put together a plan to say what we'd like to happen operationally, cost-wise, expense-wise, and then what would we need to do to incent customers to, to help us accomplish that roadmap?
Yep. So, I think this question has come up, like what would be the ideal date, and what are the things that need to happen between now and then? And I think this study will help with that a little bit. But I think there's a lot to think about and a lot of questions about what levers are available and at what point you want to signal something like that, whether you're signaling it now or whether you're signaling at 50%, sales reductions. And so I think it's going to merit a lot more discussion. I don't know that that sort of thing is off the table, but it's something that we really need to talk about in the context of the whole study.
Okay. So it strikes me that, a lot of the costs and the revenue is public information, so we're signaling it whether we want to or not. So it seemed like it would be useful at least to have it in
Yeah.
our back pocket.
I think that's going to
when we
come out
think-
as part of that study is, when the team identified the large benefits as block level kind of abandonment, you dig in 2 locations, the people electrify, you don't have to do a main replacement, you dig twice and you cap it there versus going to imagine individual services, digging up, by the main, doing all that excavation, going out doing pavement replacement. That's very expensive, right? And not that effective or efficient. So we're going to start quantifying those costs. And then when you layer on the potential avoided costs for doing a replacement, is like, what does that look like? So then we can start identifying potential areas. So I think the timeline discussion is difficult in our crystal ball. But that said, I think we'll start looking at potential areas to maybe pilot this and working with the team and finding out, does this make sense? Do we have traction with the community on how to make this work? Because I think there's a really good opportunity, especially if you don't have to install a new line.
Right, that's.
Yeah, so 100% appreciate those comments, and those are going to be incorporating. I think the timeline, that's a crystal ball that's difficult, but the opportunity, I think we can start defining in those areas.
Okay, thank you guys very much. I mean, this is a very difficult and important problem. It's a, big profitable business for CBAU, so difficult one.
Commissioner Mauder.
I want to start by echoing Phil's final comment, which is just that, Jonathan, I really want to thank you and your team and the broader utility for leading this effort. I think it's incredibly important to stay on top of it, particularly because of the implications for city finances and also because it is so clearly essential to the broader SCAP plan. So thank you. I feel like we're in good hands with the general outline of what you'd laid out, and certainly look forward to continuing to working with your team in the coming months and years. I had 2 general kind of thoughts and questions, not that I need answers to either of them, but I think it's helpful to keep them on the table. The first is just how other communities are thinking through this and not limit that analysis to US-based communities, but also to think about, internationally, like how have people approached this from a both technical perspective, but also social engagement perspective and outreach perspective. I'm not at all familiar with kind of how gas utility shutdowns have happened over time and whether there even have been any. But I think it would be really helpful to think about lessons learned. I imagine we're pretty much an early mover, but I may be wrong. And then the second is really making sure that we fully understand the legal landscape. I don't know what items might be kind of standing in the way of full block level shutdowns. And it would be, I think, helpful to make sure that we really firmly understand the legal landscape here as we kind of look at different alternatives and understand the need for incentives versus kind of unilateral decisions by the city and the utility, et cetera. Certainly the fact that we have an opportunity for avoided infrastructure costs would help to fund that incentive, but I do kind of worry given the kind of recent experience over the past decade around other energy transition landmark cases that there may be some legal risk that we should just stay on top of.
I know our city attorney would very much appreciate your comments. They work very closely with us on this stuff, and this is a topic that's very much on their mind. One thing we do is track the discussions that are going on at the state level. California Public Utilities Commission has proceedings going on with all of the gas utilities around gas system planning, which includes planning for heavy levels of electrification. And there are some pilots out there around decommissioning certain areas. So we do track those, and our attorneys track those. And then we do, we've probably done a little bit less in looking for examples through the rest of the world, but was just talking recently with a consultant about their experience trying to plan some of this sort of this type of analysis in Australia. And so there are other folks that I think that we can talk to, and we have a good network of sister cities, that are very interested to talk to us as well.
Great, Bill. Thank you again for your hard work.
Yeah, thanks for bringing this up. I did see in the, I have 3 comments or questions, and one of them was, I saw that there were a couple other times this was presented to UAC, but I don't think any of us were here at that time. So I looked back, it looks like one was by a summer intern with the support of staff. And then the second one looks like it was internal. Is this one meant to be internal, or are we going out to bid with a consultant?
It's a mix of internal and external. So we have 2 consultants, one with financial and rate planning, 3 consultants. One who helped us build our system model, and our staff now handles the system model internally. But we still have those folks on contract in case we need to consult with them. We have a second contractor who has deep analytical capabilities, who's handling trying to get an assessment of trying to estimate what sort of equipment is out there and do some simulations of different levels of electrification and how that affects main abandonment. And then we have a third consultant with the financial and rates background that can help us with the financial planning. But so it's a combination of internal staff, internal work, and then consultants supplementing.
Okay. And then I'm hoping that some of the learnings from those past studies can be used for this, but I see that the scenarios have changed quite a bit, and we're kind of modeling something different, but it's similar to, there were 3 endpoints, I think, in the last one in 2021, and this one is a kind of percentage reduction, which is just slightly different. So I hope that the learnings can translate, some of them at least.
In a lot of ways, this is a continuation of that study, in that that study analyzed where we are now, where we were expecting to be in 2030 without significant electrification, and where and what it would look like if we had electrification. I think it was of all single family areas, and significant reductions in gas use in multifamily and commercial. And so it was really sort of an endpoint analysis, and it looked at whether single family home, it sort of bookended the scenarios and said, if you were to electrify everything, all the single family homes, but you weren't able to abandon the gas lines because everybody still had 1 or 2 small appliances, what would that look like? And what would it look like if everybody did disconnect? And so what we weren't able to get at in that study was what happens in between. That endpoint, if you were able to retire a lot of gas system infrastructure, looked pretty good. The rates were very similar to what they would have been in 2030, and you were sort of maintaining this smaller skeleton gas system. But between that endpoint and the beginning point, it was hard to tell. Do you have situations where costs decline quickly, or are costs sticky and revenues decline quickly, and you have this gap that you have to make up?
Yeah.
And that's really what this study is trying to get at.
Okay. And so I guess, that study did have like a single point in time for each scenario. I think it was 2030, 2030, and 2025. So hopefully this will have some impact or some analysis of kind of overtime costs. I mean, costs overtime, not overtime costs. So that's one comment. And then the other is, I think as we sit here, we think, what is our plan for when things electrify? And I understand that this is an analysis, but I would love to have this roll into us kind of really thinking along the lines of what Commissioner Metz said as what is our plan? For sure, people are electrifying. They're not electrifying, I think, quite as much as we might have anticipated in that 2021 report. But they're doing it on a kind of slow basis right now. And as they accelerate, I'd love to have this plan kind of have the angle of what is the plan, not just what is the cost, as we analyze what's going on. I'd love to have us have some, outputs of it as a next step is how do we create a plan to make what we want happen, or at least get close to it? Like you had brought up in one of our climate working group meetings that of the people doing new construction, there's still a very large percentage putting in gas, and it's because they want the stove. So how do we change people's desire to put in gas or have gas? I feel like that needs to be, at some point, that's going to need to be something that we do as a city that should go into the plan. Things like that to actually turn it into a plan rather than a measurement instrument.
Yeah, so this is actually something we're dealing with through the SCAP work plan. So the 2026 through 2027 work plan is about piloting approaches and programs to electrification that could be scalable to the entire community, which is exactly the sort of underpinning programmatic design that we need to be able to achieve exactly what you're talking about. And it goes beyond just programs to, what are our regulatory approaches that we could use, and then outreach and, just helping make people aware of what their options are. Within this plan, I think this plan is responsive to those components of the 2026-2027 SCAP work plan. So I think put together, they represent a plan for action for the entire community on both driving electrification and then how to respond to it as it starts to affect the gas utility.
This is kind of a follow-on, but a random comment is that I saw in the Redwood, I think it was Redwood that puts together the instructions on how to electrify your house. Something about like getting a loaner induction cooktop. Things like this could be things that we try now for people that, have a big construction project coming in the future to possibly kind of start that transition happening sooner.
Yeah, and we do have induction cooktop, or we have had induction cooktop loaner programs locally. I'd have to check to see if that Actera program is still going, but yeah, that is a really important component to helping people along.
Commissioner Gupta.
Thank you. Just want to start with saying how excited I am. And thank you for bringing this study proposal forward. I think this is going to be very important for the city's climate action goals. I also wanted to add that I was also very impressed by the summer interns work in 2020. This was a great report. We should find more summer interns like this. It was very, it helped explain a lot of the basics and assumptions that they were using for the numbers.
Fulbright scholar, I believe.
Wow, very impressive. I had a bunch of ideas and questions, so bear with me. I'll go through them quickly, but I want to make sure you get the feedback you need to move forward. First, I kind of wanted to get an idea of progress since the 2020 and 2021 reports. We estimated or just had a goal of a 44% reduction in single-family residential gas use by 2025. Where do we stand today in relation to that goal?
Can you state that goal again?
Oh, sure. That was
just taking a note.
a 44% reduction in single-family residential gas use by 2025, and that's on page 4 of the 2021 report.
It's going to take me a minute to look back through that one. And do you have the full context for that? How was it stated?
It's stated in a table of electrification scenarios. So in 2021, they modeled 3 different scenarios. As Commissioner Croft mentioned, one scenario was in two scenarios were 2030. The third scenario was in 2025.
Can you give me a page number on that?
Sure, that's page 4 of the 2021.
Great. Let's see here. Okay. Yeah, these were scenarios. Yeah, and so we were saying that if you just took a straight line approach, I think from 2020, if you just took a straight line approach from 2021 all the way through 2030, 44% might be a straight line number. And what I think this was before we had actually finished the SCAP and fully developed out the climate goals. And I think as we started to develop those goals, one of the things we came to is that this is not going to be a straight line sort of thing. This is going to be an S curve. There are going to be early adopters, not that many. Eventually, if we figure out how to help most Palo Altans make the switch, we'll start to see pretty significant acceleration. And then there will be some people at the end who are just really sticky and are not going to get off gas for without a big push. And so this is really a hypothetical based on the straight line scenario. So where we are right now, in terms of residential gas use, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I can say that 3% of homes have no gas at all. Another as many as 10%, 6% verified, but as many as 10% have at least one major appliance that's all electric. So that gives you some idea of where we are. Still in the early days.
Thank you. Yeah. How does that 3% number break down in terms of, is that a number of disconnections, the 3%?
That 3% would be people with no gas at all. That's right.
Okay, that's great. That does seem like a pretty big improvement from 2020 study, which had only 168.
Yeah, it's really significant. There are a really substantial core group of Palo Altans who either have have a major gas appliance that's electrified, or know somebody who have a major gas appliance electrified. We still have a lot of work to do, but we've taken the first step.
That's right. Do we capture and use any of that data to see how it might help us with costs, or is that so small that it doesn't really help us?
I don't think it's really statistically significant yet. Where it's helpful is in providing sort of a base level of information for analyses more generally. And so far, that's mainly been on the electric side. But it's also helped us validate our models on the gas transition study. The combination of those, knowing where those homes are, plus the AMI data for those homes, helps us both look at planning on the electric side, capacity planning on the electric side, but also validates our models, estimating what gas equipment is out there based on gas usage. And that's an important precursor to be able to simulate these sort of midstream scenarios.
That's awesome.
They're helpful in that sense.
Oh, thank you. Then I had some questions and comments on the scope and methodology. In terms of the outputs from the study, are we hoping for some kind of mapping block by block, red, yellow, green, of what blocks might be best to to begin with, or most or best to electrify?
Well, yes, there's a dimension to that, and a lot of it's driven by pipe materials. Let me. So the types of materials that we have mapped out include things that are going to be on the gas replacement list over the next 20 years or so, which is typically PVC pipe and steel. And steel also has, maintenance requirements that other types of pipe don't have, which also, makes it an important place to look at for block electrification. And so we've actually mapped some locations that would be good to pilot for for block electrification pilots and experiments. The other dimension is pipe size, that there are certain lines that are sort of backbones that run through the neighborhoods that, are they have less potential for a block electrification pilot or for early targeting. We don't necessarily have branching in our system. Like PG&E's tried to identify gas lines at the end of branches. That's less. We have less of that here. We have a very networked system, but there are ways in which, there are futures that aren't like viable. Like if you have one gas line that isn't ready to be abandoned, and then all 6 of the lines around it are ready to be abandoned, you can't abandon all 6 lines. You need at least one to feed that central location. You can't have these orphaned lines in the middle. So we'll be doing some mapping to identify how much of that happens in higher electrification scenarios, and we'll scale back our expectations about how much gas main abandonment could happen under those scenarios. So those are some ways in which the mapping of higher potential lines will factor into the study.
Oh, thank you. And then addressing again the holdout problem. Can we model the holdout problem? Is that possible to do that? I'm wondering if we can model cost, say with a sensitivity analysis of like 10, 20, 30% customers per block refuse transition.
So I think the way that we're dealing with that is through making adjustments to the likelihood of people to electrify, to disconnect once they've electrified their major appliances. And we want to model scenarios under low likelihood all the way up to higher likelihoods. And that likelihood is, it's high uncertainty for us. We don't know how likely people are to disconnect once they have their major appliances electrified, because we're a little bit too early in the process to have enough good statistical data. But at least we can, in this first run at the analysis, we can understand how much value we get out of raising that likelihood, right? Because it's not just something to learn, it's also something to influence. So if we could, through incentives or programs or outreach or recognition, or just price signals, make it more likely for people to electrify, how much additional gas main abandonment could we get? That's one of the questions that we should be able to answer in this study.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. And then I was also curious, is there a kind of natural disincentive for holdouts? Because I imagine as folks disconnect from our gas system, the remaining customers are in a way left holding the proverbial bag. And so costs would be greater allocated to them. So as more and more customers disconnect, you might imagine a spiral of increasing costs leading to more customers to wanting to disconnect. Is that right, or is that too simplistic?
No, I think there is an element of that, but there are also decisions to make about if you can find the funding. Do you try to mitigate some of the impacts of those rising gas rates on people, particularly income qualified? Who are you trying to control gas rates for? How much gas? And so it's both a policy decision and a study in the dynamics of what the finances look like, what the sales are, how that gets allocated to different customer classes. But yes, those are questions we're going to be dealing with through the study.
One thing that I'd like to see kind of in all of our studies is assessing the social cost or cost avoidance to things that we do. I think it's a useful number to look at in comparison. And in this context, the social cost I've heard you address and others address before is the EPA estimate of, I think, $190 per ton in cost of carbon dioxide output. And I did some, probably inaccurate napkin math, but I estimated that if we were to electrify all single-family homes, and this is based on the 2021 report numbers, we avoid 9 million therms, and that could represent $9 to $11 million per year in avoided social damages. Holding all those assumptions. I am wondering, can we include numbers like that when studies like this are presented to policymakers like us?
We can include numbers like that for informational purposes, absolutely. And we do have some of that sort of information that we can take into consideration. They're pretty uncertain, but they're sort of helpful sort of order of magnitude indicators.
Oh, thank you. And I also wanted to address the kind of the mid-transition bulge that's mentioned in the 2021 analysis. So it projected this is in table 4 on page 8. It projected a 17% system average rate increase in FY 2025, and that's due to the mid-transition bulge. It also flagged, that memo also flagged disproportionate impacts on multifamily homes and small businesses. Can we model, or are we already planning to model rate impact by customer class and income level under a few different rate designs to address these equity concerns?
Let's see, can you give me a reference on the section in the 2021 report?
Yeah, that's page 8.
Great, thank you.
Table 4.
All right, so this table, can you repeat your question? I'm trying to connect it to this table.
Oh, sure. So I from our discussion so far, I understand the 2025 is kind of a midpoint from the study.
Yep.
So if you're looking at system average rate, it seems like as folks are decommissioning, there's this bulge in rates that occurs because you're at some midpoint where you might not realize all of the cost savings from everyone having decommissioned. In fact, you might see some, as we see here in this model, some cost growth. And perhaps that cost growth would disproportionately impact those who cannot easily disconnect from the gas system, namely multifamily homes and low-income residents who can't afford to do so. So I am wondering if it is possible, or if we're already planning to model different rate designs to see how we can address that equity issue.
So whether that's a specific rate design question, I'll have to think about that a little bit, but we are planning to model to look at different sectors within the community and see how they might be disproportionately affected. And part of the last part of the study is coming up with mitigations. So yes, we are addressing that issue.
Awesome, thank you. And then some ideas on output metrics. I wonder if we can, and feel free to say any of these are not doable or could potentially be doable. I'm wondering if we could look at data like, or output stats like miles of main retired per year, overall cost reductions in maintenance costs, and also climate costs avoided as mentioned above.
Climate costs avoided is probably less of a focus for this study, but I think we could provide some information for context. But overall, cost reductions in maintenance is a primary output measure. Miles of main retired. We're not putting timelines on anything, but if we were to look at the 20%, 40%, 60%, 80%, we'll have some estimates of the average number of miles of line that are able to be retired over all the different Monte Carlo simulations for that scenario.
Awesome. Thank you. I'm also wondering, what is the relationship between this study and our electrification goals and how that relates to grid mod? I noticed that in the 2020 study, I know these are very early estimates, and I'm not holding anyone to them, but it estimated $30 to $75 million in electric grid upgrades needed for single family residence electrification because several of the transformers were over capacity. Will this study inform our approach on grid mod?
So we have another study that's focused on the electric side. This is focused on the gas side.
Okay, thank you. And closing into the end here, I was wondering how we define core gas network. Is that the same thing as the 86-mile skeletal system that was modeled out in the 2020 report, or do we define that differently?
This is where it would be, I don't have a precise definition for what that core system is, but it tends to be the larger diameter gas mains that are, you sort of have I know I say we don't have a branching system, but we do have a system that sort of works from higher diameter mains down to gradually down to lower diameter mains. So you have these higher diameter mains that run through sort of, they're like a skeleton for the city. And so when we look at some of these higher electrification scenarios and input them into the system model, it's going to tell us whether our simulations are trying to disconnect higher diameter mains that are needed, to keep the system functioning during that transition. So that's, I don't have a firm definition of the core network, but it's those higher diameter mains.
No, sounds good. Thank you. I was wondering if this study relates in any way to Palo Alto's approaches on building codes. And how that might affect our electrification goals. For example, do new constructions or remodels require placing 220-volt outlets, behind the stove, even if it's a gas stove, putting the outlet there, putting the outlet, behind the dryer, putting an outlet by the EV charger. Does this study relate to that in any way?
It does, in the sense, this is similar to Commissioner Metz's question and Commissioner Croft's question about how to affect the rate of electrification or the impact of regulations on the rate of electrification. And in this context for you, it's the reach codes that you're asking about. And all of those things do affect the rate of electrification, but this study is about responding to, and that's something that we focus on in the 2026 through 2027 SCAP work plan that's being developed with the Sustainability Committee, how to affect that rate and speed it up. This study is about responding, just similar to grid modernization, to responding to the electrification that the community chooses to engage in.
Thank you. And then my final question, thanks again for everyone's patience. I want to add to the Vice Chair's comments about learning from other cities. There is a PG&E gas asset analysis tool. Is that something we've looked at to see what information they use to build that tool? And some other examples I've recently read about are Ithaca, New York. They have a Green New Deal initiative where they're aiming for 100% electrification. I have a more list of cities I can email that separately.
That would be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, like my fellow commissioners, I'm excited by this and looking forward to it. I'm also possibly more than the rest of them, I'm terrified. I think the costs that this is going to increase costs and a smaller set of people that's going to be imposed upon is going to be a tremendous burden, and at some point, I don't know where, becomes unviable. You know, at 24,000 customers, which is roughly where we are now, I believe, you know, we are the smallest gas utility by far in the state of California. The next largest one is the city of Long Beach with 500,000 customers. And, you know, everything I've seen says that in the short run, this is increasing costs. We have a ton of fixed costs that we're already paying down that needs to be fixed. At some point, and yes, the Monte Carlo simulation will be great. On some of them, the Monte Carlo will happily say, oh yeah, 80% of the people are in 20% of the geography and we can shut the lines down. But, you know, you're gonna have to look at something like a 75% outcome, which is not gonna be very good. It's gonna be like a shotgun, people at different places taking it out. So what comes to my mind is what decisions do we really have here? I mean, I agree with what I think you've come back with, keep this separate from the electrification programs and that sort of thing. But what are our options? And maybe we need to discuss them elsewhere. But I don't know if a 15,000 person gas utility splayed across Palo Alto's geography, maybe it's technically feasible. Is it economically feasible? Or is it going to require such an infusion from the general fund or some other, mentioned in here, other sources of funds, which would be great if they happen to be lying around. And I'm very concerned about the social justice aspect of this too. I think as Commissioner Gupta said, and others, the people who are going to get really impacted by this, just by the way rates are done, are the people who can't afford to pay. You know, I just paid $15,000 to put in an electric heat pump for my house. Not a big deal for me, but there are people who, you know, it is a big deal for, and these conversions are a big deal. So I'm coming up to is, what if we find that it's super expensive and would drive rates up? You know, I think if you go 80% reduction, that drives up the fixed cost part of rates roughly 5 times, you know, not counting the cost of actually getting rid of the meters and that sort of thing. What are we going to do? Are there alternative institutional ways of, I don't know, combining with PG&E, who has 4.3 million customers, so that we don't have to have a tiny group of customers bearing this, what might be close to the same fixed costs that we have now?
So this is part of what the SCAP funding study is meant to start getting at. There's no scenario where declining sales on the gas utility has, I mean, every scenario where you have this massively declining sales on the gas utility, every scenario is going to have an impact. So this is going to assess the scale of that impact, but I think we expect that there are going to be impacts, and that there isn't a way that it's going to generate a need for some form of outside funds and a plan, especially when you start getting to the very tail end, on how to handle the costs of abandonment. The SCAP funding study, when we reviewed the preliminary results with the Sustainability Committee, showed electrification as a net benefit for the community overall, and that included the loss of gas utility revenue, and it did not include cost savings. I mean, it didn't include distribution cost savings within the gas utility, so it was maximally conservative and still showed a net benefit. And so the implication there is that when you look at the community as a whole, all the benefits, all the costs, that there is a trade-off that the community can make. And that means that with the right legal approach, with the right funding sources identified, there has to be a way forward for the community. Now, we don't know what that way looks like yet, but the SCAP funding study is one of the ways that we're trying to identify, once the gas transition study identifies what the need is, how we address that need. And I think there is a policy decision to be made as well. You know, which groups within the community, or is it all groups? Are we trying to, and for what purposes are we trying to hold gas rates steady? And that's something we're also going to have to think about coming out of this gas transition study. So I think the solutions are there if the community wants to take them. They're not possible to do just within the gas utility. It has to be a broader discussion, likely involves votes, things like that. We're trying to get a sense of what the legal and financial dimensions are. But the early indications from our funding study are that the resources are there to make it work. So I think it's good to be afraid, but also just to bear in mind that there are potentially solutions.
The resources are there. Where are these resources? Or
Well, the trade-offs within the community are the electric systems capacity does need to be upgraded, but it's also used much more efficiently to deliver a lot more electricity. So the increases in electric use generate benefits to the community. Increases in electric use and the decreases in gasoline use from electric vehicles together generate benefits that outweigh the costs of lost gas utility revenues. There are also savings in buying gas commodity from outside the city, and something like 60% of our costs are variable as opposed to fixed in the gas utility. So when you net those against each other, you have a net benefit. And then the question is, what are the creative strategies that we could use to trade those things off against each other to help the people out who need to be helped in the transition and to achieve a long-term positive result?
yeah, I mean, those are transfer payments of some sort, which I will leave to others. I'm also concerned, again, I go back to a point brought up by Commissioner Mauter. Has anybody else ever done this at this scale, gone from, scale of utility we are to 20% or 40% over a 5 or 10 year period? And what was their experience?
I don't have an example. There are lots of folks talking about how to get there, but I think for this sort of an example, you'd probably have to look to other utilities. Examples include things like landfill closings. These are situations where you have a stream, you have a piece of infrastructure that needs to be managed. You have a stream of revenue that dries up at a certain point. Nuclear power decommissionings, people, I don't know if people who have shut down a gas utility, but people have shut down other large pieces of infrastructure. And so I think that's where you look for models.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, thank you, but decommissioning a nuclear reactor is part of a much broader utility system. And, the way that cost is allocated is not among 26,000 people, which is what we're talking about. And less, it's going to be 13,000 at some point if it's 50%. So, I'll be looking forward to it. I'm also concerned that we might be underestimating. I have no reason to believe this, except they almost always are. And you brought up nuclear decommissioning. Every single nuclear decommissioning cost has been underestimated. I suspect I'm making that up, but everyone I've seen has been well underestimated, often by a factor of 2. And if we underestimate this, we're driving down a very perilous road here. And I want us to keep open minds about other ways potentially to manage this. A gas utility with like 15,000 customers is, it's hard to accept. But thank you. It's great. Anyway, go ahead.
Do you have some suggestions on other approaches that you have in mind?
Maybe we should talk offline about them.
Yeah,
Well, we'd welcome any sort of
yeah,
feedback on that
I think
front.
this feedback is very helpful in terms of cautionary looks at assumptions and sensitivity analysis and looking at what that means. And I think that's the nexus and the crux of this evaluation is we're still maintaining our natural gas system
Yes.
to all the state and federal requirements. We were just audited by the CPUC and we got a very clean audit in terms of our system. So we're making those investments. We're keeping, the community safe. And we're looking at this transition study to see what options that looks like. So we have eyes wide open on those, alternatives and potential pitfalls.
No, I think the study as scoped, I'm super supportive and really thankful to see it as like, okay, if we hit these scenarios from electrification, what are the impacts going to be? What could we do? What will the costs look like? Yeah, I do like to keep it separate from, electrification strategies. We can put those two together later and say, what do we want to do? And I also think, keeping it there and not necessarily trying to think of how do we find these pots of money, probably for the study is the right thing. But I think we've got to think about, who is going to pay for this and how are they going to pay for it? And it's not easy.
I hear the skepticism loud and clear, and I can assure you that the thinking about where the money comes from, that's in the work plan. That's part of the SCAP funding study. So we're looking both at what do we think it's going to cost? Like Alan said, there have to be sensitivities around that. And then we have to look at what the available funding sources are and what are the impacts on the community as a whole.
Great. Thank you. Any other comments, commissioners? Thanks so much, John. That is a great presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on. The next is the memorandum on the Go Green Energy project financing. Are there any comments from the public?
If any member of the public would like to speak on item number 3, please raise your hand or press star 9 now. No hands raised.
Given that there is no public comment, can I take it there's a presentation?
So Shiva is going to give the presentation. He's our senior resource planner, and Jonathan is going to be his wingman on this one as well. Thank you.
Good evening, Commissioners. This is Shiva Swaminathan, Senior Resource Planner. We are here today to request from the UAC a recommendation to Council to extend Palo Alto's agreement with CATFA, the California Energy and Advanced Transportation Financing Authority. We will continue to enable this. Extending this agreement will continue to enable residents to access the state's Go Green Home Financing Program. Next slide, please. The ability for Palo Altans to access the consumer loans for electrification and efficiency projects is critical for the community to meet its greenhouse gas reduction goals. In July 2023, the UAC recommended to Council the approval of a 2-year agreement with CATFA. The City Council approved the agreement in September, which enabled the community to participate in the Go Green financing program. And to date, one loan for $25,000 has been processed. This loan was for a heat pump space heating project, and the term of the loan was 2.5 years with the interest rate of 3.98%. It should be noted that this customer had good credit rating too. Next slide, please. Given the importance of maintaining such a financing facility, staff is recommending extending the agreement for 3 additional years. The budget will remain unchanged at $300,000, and we anticipate this budget could generate loans of up to $2 million. Could fund loan guarantees. So the motion in front of, next slide, please. The motion in front of you today is to recommend to Council the approval of the MOA, Amendment 1 of the MOA with CATFA and the city to extend the term of the agreement for 2 years from 2 years to 5 years and continue offering Go Green Home Financing Program for Palo Alto residents. Thank you.
Would it be okay if I added? So just to put this program in the context of the climate action part of the SCAP. When we originally put this in place a couple of years ago, we had anticipated that we were going to move into a whole home electrification program pretty quickly. That program's been delayed. It was delayed for a while. It's launched this year. And these higher cost projects, usually space heating, that we're starting to see now in much more significant numbers that we've launched that whole home program. That's the type of project that this financing program is intended to serve. So as expected, when we launched our whole home program, within a couple of months, we saw our first Go Green loan. And this extension will essentially allow us to give this program the road test that it needs to see whether it's a potential solution for financing over the longer term as well. And I know Shiva can answer a lot of questions about the program.
And if I could just piggyback on that comment as well, I was able to go back and look at the previous UAC discussion on it. It was an active discussion. They were initially talking about a 5-year contract. Said, let's start with a 2-year contract. Let's bring some information back. Let's look at those administrative costs. And what you'll see in the fiscal and resource impact, the administrative costs are relatively low in terms of what was in the initial contract and several tens of thousands of dollars as a startup and then ongoing monthly costs. Because we haven't seen that, frankly, many loans, the administrative costs are quite small. Also, there has to be some coverage in case there are some loan defaults, and that was a higher percentage. And what they've found is that they're not seeing that level of default. So the 15% coverage to backfill in case of that risk has actually been reduced by more than half in that regard. So again, as we've noted, we don't have a lot of uptake. There are potential uptake, and there's really not a huge risk for us to continue this program. So that's why we're bringing it forward. I did also want to talk about the funding source. So as you may recall that the funding source is really coming in, correct me if I'm wrong, from natural gas cap and trade funds. So those are restricted funds that can be used for these types of customer programs. So they're not coming from the rate base. So they're coming from dedicated separate funds. So just wanted to provide some context in terms of that, because there was a very active discussion in the UAC and how many loans are we going to have? What was the risk? Really want to bring that back and give some input. And what we've seen is the costs are lower, the uptake has been lower. We're going to start expanding our programs, and we want to provide customers with an option. So, and this allows us to do so. So, that's why we're just wanted to extend this agreement for those additional 3 years. Yes, and we were explicitly requested to come back, and that's what staff is doing.
Thank you. Commissioner comments, questions? Commissioner Croft.
I was looking at the borrower process to finance the projects. I support this, by the way. I just have a question. My question is, it seems a little bit onerous for the Go Green contractor. And I'm wondering how robust that list of contractors is. And, for people who want to take advantage of this, I'm just kind of curious. It looks like the contractor has to wait till the end, and a lot of times there's a deposit needed up front on projects. So do you have any color on it?
Yes, for Palo Alto, there are about 100 plus contractors serving the Palo Alto region or Santa Clara County. So there's a robust set of contractors available.
And no issues with kind of submitting the proposals and waiting till the end to be paid?
Not that there must be some issues, but it's part of doing business, I presume.
I've heard in one context, I heard a little bit of feedback, to that effect that those were aspects of the program that contractors were less than excited about. One thing we've been able to do, for example, is get our full service contractor signed up with Go Green to make sure that any work that they're doing in Palo Alto, and they do quite a bit, is eligible for Go Green. So as we move into a full service whole home program, that should provide a lot more access to for the Go Green program.
Any other commissioners?
4% interest rates and $2 million, and we got one loan for 25,000. Does that mean we kept it under a bushel basket? I mean, folks just didn't find out about it, or?
We promote it through our programs for customers. Whenever we outreach them, we provide this information about the Go Green program, so people are aware of it.
In 23 or beyond that?
Every ongoing basis.
So we've done some promotion, but because this is really something that's more useful for the whole home program, and we also for our advanced heat pump water heater pilot program had a sort of niche on-bill financing program for that was just dedicated to water heaters.
Yeah.
And water heaters don't tend to reach the scale that, where you really look at financing. I think that held things back until we started offering the rebates recently for whole home electrification. And now as people go through that rebate process, we let them know about the availability of the Go Green program. And I'd have to check to see whether we're listing which contractors are certified, but they can always look that up on the Go Green website. So we're making that more available. And I think now, just over the last few months, we're starting to see, we're starting to road test. I don't know that we have the results yet, but we're starting to road test whether this is an attractive financing program or not. But for the previous 2 years, we just hadn't really been able to give it a good test run.
Yeah, council sees this on Monday, and we might get the question of, why are we even doing this? Because nobody bid for 2 years. So.
Yeah, it's because we're just starting to, we're really only just starting to test this. So we're extending it so that we can really give this the test run that is needed, because we just haven't had incentives for these larger projects until recently. So without this extension, we'd be cutting off the program before we really got a sense of how well it can work.
Okay, thanks.
I think unless there's any other comments, my only comment is I'm depressed that there's now a 7-letter acronym that I'm supposed to know, CAFTA. Do we have a motion?
Yes, I'll move
Commissioner-
that we recommend that city council approve.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Vice Chair Mater had her hand raised, but it's been lowered.
Okay, great, Commissioner Metz.
Yes, I would move that we recommend that city council approve amendment number 1 as proposed.
Second, anyone?
Oh, seconded.
Great. You want to call the roll?
Vice Chair Mater,
Yes.
Commissioner Metz,
Yes.
Commissioner Croft,
Yes.
Commissioner Phillips,
Yes.
Commissioner Gupta,
Yes.
motion carries 5-0.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. So are there any future topics that commissioners like to add for upcoming meetings? You have
I'd like to highlight 2.
go ahead.
Okay. The first one is federal government. There's been some pretty big changes with big beautiful bill and so on. Altering trashing renewable tax credits and all that. I think we have a strong government relations organization. It seems like this would be really important for us, for the utility to have its arms around, possibly in partnership with NCPA or something like that.
Yes, so we have actually gone to DC with NCPA and the other member agencies earlier this year. We've been tracking the impacts and summaries of the big beautiful bill and what that means to the utilities and our customers. We are providing the UAC a legislative and regulatory update and incorporation of potential updates to the guidelines as well. So you'll see something that coming back in November.
Okay,
So you'll,
great. That's
you know,
what I
and
was
we are,
hoping for.
yeah, so we'll provide some information to the UAC, but I appreciate that feedback and we can incorporate some of those questions into our presentation.
Okay. Then the other one I wanted to highlight is grid mod strategy, and I would incorporate within that data centers. I see that we have scheduled project update in February of 26. And then we have grid mod strategy, which is to be scheduled. I think that's quite important, particularly I think the whole data center issue, which Commissioner Phillips has, highlighted a couple of times, is really important because I think we've talked about it as something that might help to lower or at least levelize our costs. Whereas anecdotally, what you see in the press every day is that rates are going up around the country because of growth in data centers. So I think this is becoming, an urgent kind of issue for us to get our arms around.
Appreciate the comment. As noted on the 12 months calendar, those are the two items that are yet to be scheduled, so the data center competitiveness and grid monitor strategy. I will just add the data center competitiveness. We have a fellow working for the city, is rotating through the department, is developing a white paper on that. So it's in the works right now. And as soon as we have some staff to review that, which is in my queue for tomorrow, is looking at that and when we can start scheduling that work. I did want to mention though, as earlier reporting out is Palo Alto has a very strong process in working with businesses to make sure that they're paying their fair share of the capacity increases necessary to serve their needs. Specifically, I mentioned the upgrades and partnership with Tesla specifically and updating our Hanover substation, where they funded a lot of those improvements themselves, partnered with the city in terms of what improvements to that distribution substation would serve all of our customers and what would serve their needs as well. So that contract also includes protections in terms of their ramp rate and use, so we don't have stranded assets. So the city did a very good job in covering its bases to insulate the customers from potential revenue loss or stranded assets, and worked with them proactively to have that substation built on the timeline they were looking for. So balancing those needs are absolutely, critical, and we want to bring that forward as part of that competitiveness, and then ensuring that that our current customers know that we're taking this eyes wide open and looking at how that if these data centers want to come here, how we can, serve their needs and also expand the system and ensure that we're treating our existing customers fairly.
Right. I think the word competitiveness suggests,
Yes.
We're competing for that business. Whereas I think the issue, as you just said, is that's important, of course, but also the issue of other customers don't get hammered because of the addition of these centers.
Correct. Yeah, so those are very good points, and
Especially the stranded assets. It's really easy to see how that could happen.
and having competitive rates, having our permit center looking at when we can bring power to those customers, how we're integrating those to grid mod, and these really tie together. So that's why you see these as big items that aren't just something that we can just easily add. Just on the grid mod strategy, we are looking at not only our distribution system, which we've talked about in terms of serving our residential customers, but also what we call our subtransmission, which is our 60 kV system. We're studying and analyzing that in terms of the capacity needs. We're looking at the substation level in terms of existing transformers and breakers and end of useful life and standardizing on what that looks like, and how we can do distribution ties to increase reliability and resiliency. So there's a fair amount of work that's being put together on this. So appreciate your patience and understanding as we try to nail down that schedule. We are looking at those coming up in those windows of time. So we'll be adding that as soon as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm certainly looking forward to it. Commissioner Croft?
I was just looking forward on the calendar and something that I've brought up before, but I still don't see it on here is, and I could be missing it, but in the past, we've gotten some looks at the electricity resource plan. What is our forecast of needs? What contracts are rolling off? And what is the gap that we need to fill? And then we get a look at, the strategy for what we're going to fill that with and whether it's going to be solar plus storage, whatever the resource is. I feel like that's something that we should have visibility to, and I would like to have that agendized at some point, even on a regular basis, to just see what the utility is doing to fill that supply gap.
Point taken. I think I would circle back to the IPA energy storage agreement where we give a snapshot in time of where we're at in our projections. We are actively looking and working with NCPA and going through another procurement process and an RFP to get a selection of additional solar, battery, and other resources to bring that forward. So we'll take a look back at that timing and see what that looks like in terms of our projections. As part of our budget process, we'll also look at our growth projections over time, and that will inform kind of our needs into the future. So point well taken. We'll look at how we can add that to the calendar.
That'd be great. And also, I realize we were interested in some on the last round. So it sounds like it's not a given that you'll actually succeed in acquiring some of these, because I guess there's a lot of demand for them. So that's why I think some visibility to, how we're going to fill that would be helpful.
Yeah, there's a lot of demand. There's a lot of changing landscapes in terms of some of the incentives and so yes, we are actively engaged in potential new resources.
Commissioner Gupta.
Oh, thank you. I had two questions about the schedule. First was on fiber. Were you saying in your director's report we would be getting an update in our next meeting for fiber? Will that be an agendized item?
Yes, and I wanted to highlight that as well. So the changes that we're going to add is an update to the fiber. I was going to possibly do that in the director's report to see how flushed it is. So at minimum, it'd be in the director's report. If it's more robust, we'll add it as an agenda item. But we can, if the UAC chooses, we can certainly put it as an agenda item for more active discussion.
Awesome, thank you.
But I don't know how detailed that update is going to be, so I just wanted to provide that caveat. The one other change I wanted to mention on here is the utility trench and substructure installation contracts. We're seeing that actually go in the October timeframe to City Council, so just wanted to highlight that. So we try to keep as updated as possible on this and just highlight that for your information.
Thank you. And then are we still on track, you think, for the January 2026 fiber pilot report out? Or do you think that will get pushed back?
Our staff looks at this prior to, so I'm not modifying that date
Cool,
at all.
yeah.
So we're going to stick to that, and unless something changes. But again, we'll provide an update in October, and if we need to make a modification, or adjustment, we'll have a better information at that point.
Oh, sounds good. Thank you. And then I know we need to vote our budget subcommittee. Is that on schedule sometime in the future meeting?
So that's a very good point. What we would need to do is to create an ad hoc specifically for that. As you may recall, that was one of the clarifications that we needed to work on. So I'll put that on our list and see when we can bring that and start those discussions.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate that.
Okay, on commissioners have any comments, reports? I think Commissioner Gupta, could you report on the Gas COSA subcommittee if you're ready to do that? Otherwise,
Yeah, I can report out. So we just have a brief report right now. We're working really hard. Staff is working really hard. Our consultant is working really hard. We're working towards having a report out for you. I can tell you that the Gas COSA subcommittee met twice with staff on August 14th and on August 26th. Our next meeting is scheduled for September 23rd. The final Gas COSA is scheduled for a full UAC review at our November 5th, 2025 meeting. So thank you.
Thank you. I was at a meeting with other, well, I shouldn't say other because I'm not a chair or vice chair, but everyone else is a chair or vice chair of a committee. I was kind of the vice squared chair, I guess, since the vice chair and the chair were not available, with Mayor Lowing and Vice Mayor Venker, discussing issues. I would say issues, and I'd love to give your perspective, Mayor Lowing as well, seem kind of a lot very specific to particular commissions and boards. The one issue we discussed for the UAC was one that's come up here a couple times, is a little bit, it seems like there's a lack of feedback for, we make decisions or we pass motions or we have discussions and then we don't really hear back. And what are some ways in which we could potentially do that? I mean, as an example, I see on here, it says electric time of use rates and connection fee updates and gas cost of service analysis were the finance subcommittee meeting. That was last night. And I have no idea, what came out of that. And is there a better process? I'm just kind of up in the air. We don't think we decided on it, in order to kind of keep us informed and keep everyone else informed to make sure that the finance committee and the city council has, full advantage of our recommendations and our consultations. I don't know, Mayor Lowing, if you have anything to add.
A few meetings ago, it was brought up here for staff of, first of all, well, maybe even more than that, maybe it's a year ago, that you wanted more direct feedback on what council accomplished. And I think Assistant City Manager started to work on that even before the new Director of Utilities came in. And now you're getting a report on that at the beginning of each meeting. So that would hopefully close some of that loop. I think more of the specifics that were that were put on the table at this meeting that we had is whether there should be an assigned commissioner from this group that comes to a council meeting on every time there's a substantial utilities advisory commission recommendation or subject. And similarly, whether that should be the case as well with the finance committee. So I think that was the issues that were raised. And I think it'd be a process that you would decide what you want to do and then pose it. I don't see that there'd be any resistance from council or the finance committee. We do that only at this point for PTC because of the complexity of those. And we don't always call on that person that night because we don't feel like there is anything that we need to know because they've made their judgments. The staff report is okay. We could, but we don't always, Joe. So I'm only mentioning that in the sense that there could be a resource there that is there for an hour or two and not called on. On the other hand, it's perfectly acceptable for if we did that with this commission beforehand. If you told me, in this case, as the mayor, I definitely want to talk tonight. We can accommodate that. There's no intent to muzzle. It's just, it's there to get the best information we can. And sometimes we feel like we have enough. So that's why with BTC, we don't always call on folks.
Is this something that my fellow commissioners would like to see agendized for the future, or are we okay? It's kind of informal.
Oh, go ahead.
You go ahead.
I without wading into discussion, I can tell you that Chair Scharf, Commissioner Tucker, and myself have also been discussing this with the director and staff on how to improve ways of reporting things out. There's been some ideas, and again, I don't want to jump into discussion in this under this topic, but I do think it would be worthwhile to agendize discussion item in the future, so we can all, come up to speed and make some recommendations on how we can improve process.
Yeah, it's not agendized for tonight, so we can't have a substantive discussion, but we could say yes or no, we would like to discuss at a future meeting.
I'd be okay with that. I think it makes sense because we brought it up so many times.
Commissioner Metz? I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say one footnote. If whatever you decide and council decides is not predictive of what we have to do for every other commission. Now, one of the points that I made at this meeting was that I think the commissions are way more different than they are similar, with the one exception that they're all created for the point of hearing citizen input and then recommending to council what they've heard based on their judgment and expertise. There was an attempt about 4 years ago to make all commissions look alike, which I thought was just completely off base by the then council members, because they just aren't. And I think that's been proven. We've actually rolled back some of the things in the handbook. So,
Commissioner Mauder, you came on. I'm not sure you have your hand raised, but your face appeared.
No, thanks.
You-
No, I think it's helpful to have a discussion about how this commission wants to operate and represent. I guess I would just say that I think we should define substantive issues before council with a pretty high bar, so that we're not flooding the council agenda or having expectations that we're bringing, really that council members haven't already looked at UAC minutes and don't already understand the issues on the table. So I would actually really like to see this in terms of more of a council requesting our additional input and representation. But Mayor Lowering, I'm not sure whether that's a tact that you discussed in that meeting or seems viable from your perspective. And if we just need to agendize this to have a more robust discussion,
yeah, that's the point.
It's also
You really
fine.
can't discuss it tonight because it's not agendized.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
we're open to anything that you guys advise on any issue, including this kind of process stuff.
So I think, given that, could we put it as an agenda point for a future meeting? Looking at the meetings.
I'm looking at the meetings as well. It looks like the window would probably be earliest is be the December meeting. But we can take a look at looking at stacking this in terms of the discussion points and trying to obviously finish in that 9 o'clock window that this commission is trying to shoot for. So we'll start noodling on that.
Thank you. Yeah, to be clear, I think it should be I think the communication would be useful in two ways. I would love to hear back, and I know I can replay the city council meetings, but I'd love to have somebody come back and say, what did the council, when they voted on this, what did they discuss and what did they think of as important in terms of these things? So great, if we could agendize it for December. With that, any other commissioners have any reports, meetings and events?
I have one, which is that I attended the Climate Working Group meeting earlier today. They discussed revisions to the REACH code. They're emergency revisions because of the limitation on revising them at a later date. And so those revisions were, the first one was for people who are changing out air conditioning units to try to get them to move over to heat pump heating units. And the second one was if somebody's doing a renovation or addition of 1,000 square feet or more, there's a point system that person or that project needs to meet on all kinds of great efficiency or greenhouse gas emission reducing changes and updates to the house that they would do. There's a 20% limit, if it's over 20% of the project cost, they would not be held to that. But this is going to the Climate Working Group Committee meeting on Friday, and then it'll process very quickly through. So if anybody is interested in following that, there's a meeting on Friday. And the other thing they discussed was the NOx standards that are coming. And for people who are replacing their water heaters, there were some They just wanted to discuss various ideas on incentives to help people upgrade to a heat pump water heater instead of other options that are, low NOx, for example, electric resistance heating or electric tankless water heaters, things that we don't want people to do. So those are the two discussion items. I just want to let people know that that's going on. And both those items are being discussed Friday at the committee meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Croft. Commissioner Gupta.
In the 2-month span since our last meeting, I attended the MSC open house. It was a wonderful event. I highly recommend it. Free soft serve. There was a line truck that I didn't get to ride. Missed out on that one, but it was also really educational. I learned about our stormwater management, and getting to see it visually in a model display was really neat. So if you have a chance to go next year, please check it out.
I second that. I didn't go this year, but I've gone 2 previous years, and it's a great event. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second.
I can do a show of hands, I think. Meeting is adjourned.